Chapter 13 of The Stolen Bacillus and Other Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Beth Thomas. The Stolen Bacillus and Other Stories by H.G. Wells. The Hammerpond Park Burglary. It is a moot point whether burglary is to be considered as a sport, a trade, or an art. For a trade, the technique is scarcely rigid enough, and its claims to be considered an art are vitiated by the mercenary element that qualifies its triumphs. On the whole, it seems to be most justly ranked as a sport for which no rules are at present formulated, and of which the prizes are distributed in an extremely informal manner. It was this informality of burglary that led to the regrettable extinction of two promising beginners at Hammerpond Park. The stakes offered in this affair consisted chiefly of diamonds and other personal bric-a-brac belonging to the newly married Lady Aveling. Lady Aveling, as the reader will remember, was the only daughter of Mrs. Montague Pangs, the well-known hostess. Her marriage to Lord Aveling was extensively advertised in the papers, the quantity and quality of her wedding presents, and the fact that the honeymoon was to be spent at Hammerpond. The announcement of these valuable prizes created a considerable sensation in the small circle in which Mr. Teddy Watkins was the undisputed leader, and it was decided that, accompanied by a duly qualified assistant, he should visit the village of Hammerpond in his professional capacity. Being a man of naturally retiring and modest disposition, Mr. Watkins determined to make this visit incognito, and after due consideration of the conditions of his enterprise, he selected the role of a landscape artist and the unassuming surname of Smith. He preceded his assistant, who it was decided should join him only on the last afternoon of his stay at Hammerpond. Now the village of Hammerpond is perhaps one of the prettiest little corners in Sussex. Many thatched houses still survive. The flint-built church with its tall spire nestling under the down is one of the finest and least restored in the country, and the beech woods and bracken jungles through which the road runs to the great house are singularly rich in what the vulgar artist and photographer call bits. So that Mr. Watkins, on his arrival with two virgin canvases, a brand new easel, a paint-box, portmanteau, an ingenious little ladder made in sections, after the pattern of the late lamented Master Charles Peace, crowbar and wire coils, found himself welcomed with effusion and some curiosity by half a dozen other brethren of the brush. It rendered the disguise he had chosen unexpectedly plausible, but it inflicted upon him a considerable amount of aesthetic conversation for which he was very imperfectly prepared. "Have you exhibited very much?" said young Pawson in the bar parlour of the Coach and Horses, where Mr. Watkins was skilfully accumulating local information on the night of his arrival. "Very little," said Mr. Watkins, "just a snack here and there." "Academy?" "Of course, and the Crystal Palace." "Did they hang you well?" said Pawson. "Don't rot," said Mr. Watkins. "I don't like it." "I mean, did they put you in a good place?" "What do you mean?" said Mr. Watkins suspiciously. "One'd think you were trying to make out I'd been put away." Pawson had been brought up by aunts, and was a gentlemanly young man even for an artist. He did not know what being put away meant, but he thought it best to explain that he intended nothing of the sort. As the question of hanging seemed a sore point with Mr. Watkins, he tried to divert the conversation a little. "Do you do figure work at all?" "No, never had a head for figures," said Mr. Watkins. "My Mrs. Smith, I mean, does all that." "She paints too," said Pawson. "That's rather jolly." "Very," said Mr. Watkins, though he really did not think so, and feeling the conversation was drifting a little beyond his grasp, added, "I came down here to paint Hammerpond House by moonlight." "Really?" said Pawson. "That's rather a novel idea." "Yes," said Mr. Watkins. "I thought it a rather good notion when it occurred to me. I expect to begin tomorrow night." "What? You don't mean to paint in the open, by night?" "I do, though." "But how will you see your canvas?" "Have a bloomin' copse," began Mr. Watkins, rising too quickly to the question, and then, realizing this, bawled to Miss Durgan for another glass of beer. "I'm going to have a thing called a dark lantern," he said to Pawson. "But it's about new moon now," objected Pawson. "There won't be any moon." "There'll be the house," said Watkins. "At any rate, I'm going, you see, to paint the house first and the moon afterwards." "Oh," said Pawson, too staggered to continue the conversation. "They do say," said old Durgan, the landlord, who had maintained a respectful silence during the technical conversation, "as there's no less than 3 policemen from Hazelworth on duty every night at the house, counted this Lady Aveling and her jewellery. One 'em won 4 and 6 last night off second footman tossing." Towards sunset next day, Mr. Watkins, virgin canvas, easel, and a very considerable case of other appliances in hand, strolled up the pleasant pathway through the beech woods to Hammerpond Park, and pitched his apparatus in a strategic position commanding the house. Here he was observed by Mr. Raphael Sant, who was returning across the park from a study of the chalk pits. His curiosity having been fired by Pawson's account of the new arrival, he turned aside, with the idea of discussing nocturnal art. Mr. Watkins was apparently unaware of his approach. A friendly conversation with Lady Hammerpond's butler had just terminated, and that individual, surrounded by the 3 pet dogs which it was his duty to take for an airing after dinner had been served, was receding in the distance. Mr. Watkins was mixing colour with an air of great industry. Sant, approaching more nearly, was surprised to see the colour in question was as harsh and brilliant an emerald green as it is possible to imagine. Having cultivated an extreme sensibility to colour from his earliest years, he drew in air sharply between his teeth at the very first glimpse of this brew. Mr. Watkins turned round. He looked annoyed. "What on earth are you going to do with that beastly green?" said Sant. Mr. Watkins realised that his zeal to appear busy in the eyes of the butler had evidently betrayed him into some technical error. He looked at Sant and hesitated. "Pardon my rudeness," said Sant, "but really that green is altogether too amazing. It came as a shock. What do you mean to do with it?" Mr. Watkins was collecting his resources. Nothing could save the situation but decision. "If you come here interrupting my work," he said, "I'm a-going to paint your face with it." Sant retired, for he was a humorist and a peaceful man. Going down the hill, he met Pawson and Wainwright. "Either that man is a genius, or he is a dangerous lunatic," said he. "Just go up and look at his green." And he continued his way, his countenance brightened by a pleasant anticipation of a cheerful affray round an easel in the gloaming, and the shedding of much green paint. But to Pawson and Wainwright, Mr. Watkins was less aggressive, and explained that the green was intended to be the first coating of his picture. It was, he admitted in response to a remark, an absolutely new method, invented by himself. But subsequently he became more reticent. He explained he was not going to tell every passer-by the secret of his own particular style, and added some scathing remarks upon the meanness of people hanging about to pick up such tricks of the masters as they could, which immediately relieved him of their company. Twilight deepened. First one, then another star appeared. The rooks amid the tall trees to the left of the house had long since lapsed into slumberous silence. The house itself lost all the details of its architecture and became a dark grey outline. And then the windows of the salon shone out brilliantly, the conservatory was lighted up, and here and there a bedroom window burnt yellow. Had anyone approached the easel in the park, it would have been found deserted. One brief uncivil word in brilliant green sullied the purity of its canvas. Mr. Watkins was busy in the shrubbery with his assistant, who had discreetly joined him from the carriage drive. Mr. Watkins was inclined to be self-congratulatory upon the ingenious device by which he had carried all his apparatus boldly, and in the sight of all men, right up to the scene of operations. "That's the dressing-room," he said to his assistant, "and as soon as the maid takes the candle away and goes down to supper, we'll call in. My, how nice the house do look, to be sure, against the starlight, and with all its windows and lights. Swap me, Jim, I almost wish I was a painter chap. Have you fixed that there wire across the path from the laundry?" He cautiously approached the house until he stood below the dressing-room window and began to put together his folding ladder. He was much too experienced a practitioner to feel any unusual excitement. Jim was reconnoitring the smoking-room. Suddenly, close by Mr. Watkins in the bushes, there was a violent crash and a stifled curse. Someone had tumbled over the wire which his assistant had just arranged. He heard feet running on the gravel pathway beyond. Mr. Watkins, like all true artists, was a singularly shy man, and he incontinently dropped his folding ladder and began running circumspectly through the shrubbery. He was indistinctly aware of 2 people hot upon his heels, and he fancied that he distinguished the outline of his assistant in front of him. In another moment he had vaulted the low stone wall bounding the shrubbery and was in the open park. 2 thuds on the turf followed his own leap. It was a close chase in the darkness through the trees. Mr. Watkins was a loosely built man and in good training, and he gained hand over hand upon the hoarsely panting figure in front. Neither spoke, but as Mr. Watkins pulled up alongside, a qualm of awful doubt came over him. The other man turned his head at the same moment and gave an exclamation of surprise. "It's not Jim," thought Mr. Watkins. and simultaneously the stranger flung himself, as it were, at Watkins' knees, and they were forthwith grappling on the ground together. "Lend a hand, Bill!" cried the stranger as the third man came up. And Bill did, 2 hands in fact, and some accentuated feet. The fourth man, presumably Jim, had apparently turned aside and made off in a different direction. At any rate, he did not join the trio. Mr. Watkins' memory of the incidents of the next 2 minutes is extremely vague. He has a dim recollection of having his thumb in the corner of the mouth of the first man and feeling anxious about its safety. And for some seconds at least he held the head of the gentleman answering to the name of Bill to the ground by the hair. He was also kicked in a great number of different places, apparently by a vast multitude of people. Then the gentleman who was not Bill got his knee below Mr. Watkins' diaphragm and tried to curl him up upon it. When his sensations became less entangled, he was sitting upon the turf, and 8 or 10 men, the night was dark and he was rather too confused to count, standing round him, apparently waiting for him to recover. He mournfully assumed that he was captured, and would probably have made some philosophical reflections on the fickleness of fortune had not his internal sensations disinclined him for speech. He noticed very quickly that his wrists were not handcuffed, and then a flask of brandy was put in his hands. This touched him a little, it was such unexpected kindness. "He's a-comin' round," said a voice which he fancied he recognised as belonging to the Hammerpond second footman. "We've got 'em, sir, both of 'em," said the Hammerpond butler, the man who had handed in the flask. "Thanks to you." No one answered this remark, yet he failed to see how it applied to him. "He's fair dazed," said a strange voice. "The villains half murdered him." Mr. Teddy Watkins decided to remain fair dazed until he had a better grasp of the situation. He perceived that 2 of the black figures round him stood side by side with a dejected air, and there was something in the carriage of their shoulders that suggested to his experienced eye hands that were bound together. 2! In a flash he rose to his position. He emptied the little flask and staggered, obsequious hands assisting him, to his feet. There was a sympathetic murmur. "Shake hands, sir, shake hands," said one of the figures near him. "Permit me to introduce myself. I am very greatly indebted to you. It was the jewels of my wife, Lady Aveling, which attracted these scoundrels to the house." "Very glad to make your lordship's acquaintance," said Teddy Watkins. "I presume you saw the rascals making for the shrubbery and dropped down on them." "That's exactly how it happened," said Mr. Watkins. "You should have waited till they got in at the window," said Lord Aveling. "They would get it hotter if they had actually committed the burglary. And it was lucky for you 2 of the policemen were out by the gates and followed up the 3 of you. I doubt if you could have secured the 2 of them, though it was confoundedly plucky of you all the same." "Yes, I ought to have thought of all that," said Mr. Watkins. "But one can't think of everything." "Certainly not," said Lord Aveling. "I am afraid they have mauled you a little," he added. The party was now moving towards the house. "You walk rather lame. May I offer you my arm?" And instead of entering Hammerpond House by the dressing-room window, Mr. Watkins entered it, slightly intoxicated and inclined now to cheerfulness again, on the arm of a real live peer, and by the front door. "This," thought Mr. Watkins, "is burgling in style." The scoundrels, seen by the gaslight, proved to be mere local amateurs, unknown to Mr. Watkins, and they were taken down into the pantry, and there watched over by 3 policemen, 2 gamekeepers with loaded guns, the butler, an ostler, and a carman, until the dawn allowed their removal to Hazelhurst Police Station. Mr. Watkins was made much of in the saloon. They devoted a sofa to him, and would not hear of a return to the village that night. Lady Aveling was sure he was brilliantly original, and said her idea of Turner was just such another rough, half-inebriated, deep-eyed, brave and clever man. Someone brought up a remarkable little folding ladder that had been picked up in the shrubbery, and showed him how it was put together. They also described how wires had been found in the shrubbery, evidently placed there to trip up unwary pursuers. It was lucky he had escaped these snares. And they showed him the jewels. Mr. Watkins had the sense not to talk too much, and, in any conversational difficulty, fell back on his internal pains. At last he was seized with stiffness in the back and yawning. Everyone suddenly awoke to the fact that it was a shame to keep him talking after his affray, so he retired early to his room, the little red room next to Lord Aveling's suite. The dawn found a deserted easel bearing a canvas with a green inscription in the Hammerpond Park, and it found Hammerpond House in commotion. But if the dawn found Mr. Teddy Watkins and the Aveling diamonds, it did not communicate the information to the police. End of chapter 13.